Welcome back to another episode of Hungry for the Word. Um, we're calling this episode Life-Giving Spirits. It is sort of a continuation. So if you haven't listened to the Resurrection Without Exception, feel free to pause this now and do that. Not necessary, but it's a good amount of context for what we'll cover today. And so life-giving spirits is what we have been made. It's what our new being is. That's where we are of the Father and like the Father, who is the original life-giving spirit. And this is the second half of the First Corinthians 15:42 to 49. But before I jump into that, did you have any thoughts, anything you wanted to preface with?
No, no, go ahead. I mean,
Perfect.
well,
Um, So this is 45 right here. Thus it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. So he was dust, formed of the dust. And it says in Genesis that God breathed life into him. And specifically in Hebrew, there is the letter He, and it's the breath of God. It's in the Tetragrammaton, the Yod He Vav He, which is Yahweh, or what we call Jehovah or the Lord in all caps in most modern day translations. It's the Hay that is part of that. It is the breath of life. It holds everything together. It gives life. And so the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, which is Jesus, who is the last one born of women to before we're now a totally new species of being, became a life-giving spirit. The first man was from the earth, a man of dust. The second man is, current tense, from heaven. As was the man of dust, so are those of the dust. And as is the man of heaven, so are those who are of heaven. Let us also bear the image of the man of heaven. And
mm,
so, again, that's a tall task if you're talking about you as a human, broken, full of sin, having the issues you have, becoming Jesus. That is that's an impossible task. That's the whole point.
yes.
It's not something that you can do. It's not something that any man could do so that they may boast. It is a gift, truly a gift of the Father to prophesy our end from the beginning and speak over us and put into us a new thing again in the quantum world. He's talking about our completed state, which also happens to be right now. You are already seated in heaven, the perfect being, one with his son, one with the body, one with him as a life giving spirit. And again, we could spend the entire episode talking about what that means, but specifically to emphasize that that's what's happened. And
In our born again experience, that's what
exactly.
Jesus talks about happened. We became a new creation, and that is
Yes.
the description of the creation that we now are.
Yep. Exactly. It's like the way that Jesus was fully man, fully God. So are you. And I don't mean that you, again, that's where the ego jumps in. It's, oh, you're saying I'm God? Of course, you're not Yahweh who created yourself. Of course, you're not the potter, you're the clay. And yet, that's the offensiveness and yet the loftiness. If you go and read the Psalms, if you read the Old Testament, if you read the book of Enoch, if you understand how mightily Paul is saying that all of creation is yearning For the same salvation, the freedom of the glory of the sons of God, that all of creation, heaven, earth, plants, animals, angels, other beings, not so good stuff, is just groaning, waiting for our glory, our salvation to be revealed. And that's not something you can do for yourself. It's something he's already done to you. And in your believing it, you receive it and it flows forth into the world.
And transforms you into his image. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that was Romans 8 you were quoting
Okay.
about the all of creation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was just thinking of 1 John 4:17. Love has been perfected among us in this way, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in the world.
Wow. And in the world, like he
Yeah,
specifically
as
added that.
he is. That's as Jesus is,
Yes.
so are we in the world.
Yes. And that is so quick jump to Isaiah. In Isaiah 11, which I was quoting in the last one, higher up, he says, "He shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge." And again, I don't know about you, but when I wake up in the morning and I see my reflection in the mirror, if I were to judge strictly based on what I see and hear, I would not say that I am the same exact thing as the risen Christ. And yet, that's part of what I think we've talked about, if not in every episode, 90% of them, that believing the word of the Lord is sort of this chicken and the egg thing. You not believing it doesn't make it not true. And yet, it will almost ensure that it's not true in your experience. And so, just opening the door and being willing to believe that he's not a man, so he won't lie. He doesn't mess around. He was here for 33 years, spent 3 of them in ministry, and I'm certain that during those 3 years, he was extremely careful about what he said to tell you exactly what was going on. And again, the idea that this is what we have been made is we're quick to judge that and not agree with it based on what we see in the physical. And I think that that's why I love this verse so much from Corinthians, because what is sown is perishable, but what is raised is imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, raised in glory, sown in weakness, raised in power, sown in a physical body, raised in a spiritual body. If there is a physical body, there is also a spiritual. And I almost wish maybe I'll try to find the link so I can put it in the description of this episode. But that video I showed you last week of the mandalas, which are the sacred
Oh,
geometry,
yeah.
it's like the shapes of things. And this woman has 3 mandalas. And as she overlays them and stacks them perfectly, it forms the perfect image of a human. And the way that they are sort of cancel each other out, it looks like just a photograph, not special effects or anything. And so the idea that those 3 pages of the mandalas represent spirit, soul, body, and you are this being that is overlaid multiple times. And so what you see is really the tip of the iceberg compared to the truth of what you are, that all matter is just energy slowed to a vibration and held together by, we'll call it a force. And the concept of being made something on the level that you can't see that could eventually affect the rest of the levels you can see, and how insisting on seeing it on this level in order to believe it prevents it from making the jump, if you will, from the level that it is true to the level where all of creation is groaning for
Mm,
the freedom of the glory, you know?
mm. Well, and that's a journey. That's a process.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
the way to
And we're
participate in
we're
that,
on it, by the way.
yeah,
You
we're
and I
on
are
it.
both walking on it.
And the way to participate is to continue to surrender
Mm,
that which is identified as, there's a concept in throughout mostly the Psalms and Proverbs about a crooked heart
mm,
versus if you it's kind of the idea of his perfect light comes through us, but it then hits our soul and our heart. And if we were standing exactly in that perfected sun image, that light would just shine white to white. But it
totally.
hits our stuff and kind
Uh-huh.
of, gets forward. That's another word, in a forward heart, a crooked heart.
Mm.
The idea of soil being the heart in the
Well, and
parable.
that
Yeah,
Hebrew word for crooked, one of the synonyms based on the root Hebrew word is like bent and refracted. So to your
yeah.
point, it's like the light's trying to make it and it just gets curved away.
Yeah. So, and we've mentioned this before. So the process is a matter of surrendering and
Hmm.
subtracting those things that we have placed that refracts that perfect light that is already in us,
Totally.
that is attempting to shine up. And I love the way First John, going back to First John 4:17, that starts, love has been perfected among us.
Has
And
past tense.
yeah, so that is the process. Another description again of that process. Love, the essence of the Lord in us, which is love, is being perfected, which is a process. It's
Mm,
also implies a journey.
totally. And
Yeah.
and again, the journey religion would have you think that the journey is you're here, perfection is here, and you're going like this.
You
And
have to
in
walk across.
reality,
Yeah.
exactly, I think in reality, a more accurate visual would be vertically, that
Yeah.
this is already your perfect self, where that light is not not reflected, magnified. That's the whole
Mhm.
point of humanity, is God's glory is on display even more than it was before him, or before we were there. And that's, again, maybe another episode, but you are down here. And so the journey is not a becoming, it's this sludge that has you weighed down to here, the chains that are on your heart and soul and thoughts. All those things must be shed and transcended so that, ironically, you just lose it. You don't become the new thing. This ceases to be. And
Oh, yeah.
that, I think, is part of, the 3 days that changed the world, what that shows, the three stages, if you will, of the death, burial, and resurrection, the way that Paul instructs us to put off the old, die, put on the new that was created in this way, is, again, backwards from what we might naturally conceive, what society teaches us, what the church teaches us is the way to go about that, is not by doing work. It is by shedding those things so that what is already true can flow through you. Again,
Mm.
I'm struggling with another way to say it, you know?
Well, yeah, it's hard. I mean, we talked about that last time. You can
Hmm.
only describe it. It's like this. It's like this because the process is so unique to every person,
Yes.
that it is. Once you're born again, you can see the kingdom. That's, I think, 1 John 3:3. So that's when you start to see the spiritual truths of the kingdom and this way, if
Mm,
you will, this way that he would have you walk to shed that old man. And we can only really lead people to the door,
yeah.
but the actual process, we can support you in it, but you can't really describe it.
Well, it's funny. Um the other verse that I had pulled up for life-giving spirits, this is from Revelation, Revelation 22, and I'm gonna um sort of skip a little bit, um, not all about, but I'll start with 14. Blessed are those who wash their robes so that they might have the right to the tree of life and may enter the city by the gates. 16. It is I, Jesus, who sent my angel to you with his testimony for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. 17. Let anyone who is thirsty come. Let anyone who wishes to take the water of life take it as a gift. And again, that might feel kind of unrelated, but to me, that's the process that we're talking about. The aspect of those who wash their robes is the the blood has been spilt already. That's earlier in Revelation. It tells us, blessed are those whose robes are made clean by the blood of the Lamb. And so the act, if you will, of surrendering, of repenting, of continuing to not do something to atone, do something to fix it, to continue to put Jesus's blood on your brokenness, to continue to sow where you feel dishonor, where you feel weakness, where it is so apparent to you, you are still a physical body, you are still flesh, that sowing it there by not you doing something, not you taking from the knowledge of good and evil as to what to do and what not to do, only going to the blood and letting that perfect, incorruptible seed be the thing that is planted. And inevitably, he says, it is raised in glory, raised in power, raised in the spiritual body. And so they will have the right to the tree of life and can enter by the gates. How can Jesus, this is, I'm skipping ahead, how can he be the root and the descendant of David? He is the I am. He is a life-giving spirit, which once you're that being, you're before creation and after creation. It's like he's able to in the resurrection, he's this life-giving spirit that is outside the confines of time. And so even if there is a physical body for him to occupy, it is, oh gosh, that's a rabbit hole I
Mm.
don't want to pull at. You know what I mean? But let everyone who is thirsty come, and let anyone who wishes to take the water of life as a gift. That you drink from the water of life, and what do you have now? You have life. Jesus says to
Mm.
the woman at the well, anyone who drinks from me, I would give them a spring that bubbles up to eternal life. It's just this being that you've been made is not a human that has a little bit of hope for glory. The Father who is holy, 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 his divinity did not decrease in any way when he made his home in you. And the act of surrendering, of dying, repenting, washing your robes in the blood is again, sort of what we talked about in the last couple episodes. I think it's continually forgiving yourself that you are
Mm,
clearly not behaving as one who hosts the King of Glory. You are not behaving as one who is the King of Glory, who is one with him. And so, can you forgive yourself and sow the gift he's given you time and time again, mistake after mistake, for yourself and others, endlessly planting his incorruptible, imperishable seed in the place of that dishonor and weakness and flesh. And
mm.
so allow his gift to grow more than what you could ever hope to accomplish if you were the one overseeing the fixing up, if that makes
Oh, yeah.
sense.
Oh, yeah. That just reminded me of, that's kind of the life-giving spirit.
Hmm.
Not only is it life-giving to us first, uh, but it doesn't stop there. It
Hmm.
extends out of us and
Yeah,
brings life wherever we go.
exactly.
So,
Exactly. Well, and I know I've alluded to it, but Jesus so confidently said, "You will do my works and greater." And
mm.
I don't know about you, but I feel sort of a glass ceiling already about the works that he did. Like I'm trying to get there. And there's the issue. I'm trying to get there. I know I said it
Mm,
in the last one, but there's no sickness in heaven. There's no dead in heaven. There's no healing that needs to take place. There's no forgiveness that still hasn't been given and received. And so, me of my own power and ability trying to gain gifts that have no currency on the other side. In that kingdom, being able to do that is par for the course.
mhm,
And so the act of surrendering to what it could possibly mean to do Jesus's works and greater as one with him, as an extension of the branch. I think about, again, Isaiah 11, the a shoot shall come up out of the stump of Jesse. And if you've ever seen that happen in nature where a tree gets cut down, but then they put a little like maybe peat moss or something like that over the top of the trunk. And doing so allows the tree to put forth more of its energy into a new shoot. And so while it's not the same tree that regrows, it's several trees that grow in the place that one tree can feed them all. And I think
mm,
about that visual for that's ultimately what Jesus's life led to is
mhm,
a beautiful tree that ended up being cut down, and how many infinite branches, how many infinite more shoots have come up. That's, I think that's why he gives the parable of the wheat, because wheat specifically, if you have a head of grain of wheat, it has to actually die in order to be planted. But depending on the soil that it goes in, one grain of wheat can produce 100 fold, 100x multiple of just the one seed that went in.
mhm,
And that's Jesus. He was a life giving spirit to the nth degree. And he says, now go and do likewise. And
mm,
again, I'm trying to become that by my actions, by my thoughts, instead of surrendering to the fact I have been made that. So go out and try to drive it. Go out and
yeah.
try to be it. You
Go
know what I
learn how
mean?
to be it. Go
Go
learn
learn
how.
through skinning your knee, not through reading more books about what it's like to do that. You know?
Yeah. I'm reminded of Second Peter 1:3. His
Mm,
divine power has given us all things that pertain to life and godliness through
yes.
the knowledge of him who called us by glory and virtue. So he's given us all things to learn how to
Yes.
operate this new vehicle, if you will.
And will you read
But
the next sentence from that? That to me is he's given it And then he tells you explicitly, these are the instructions of how to walk in that.
So that would be 14. Knowing that shortly I must be,
Nope.
oh, nope, wrong one.
I think it's 4, not
Yeah,
14.
sorry. I thought I was at 13. But it's First Peter or Second Peter 1:4, by have which have been given to us exceedingly great and precious promises, that through these you may be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through
Mm-hmm.
lust.
And it's through these his promises. How do you partake in the divine nature? Through these great and precious promises he's given that are so lofty that we would reject them as being, there's no way you would do that for me. There's
Yeah.
no chance that you would just give me all of your glory, me who is broken and with fault and has done what I've done. There's no way you would just give me your glory. And yes, he would.
Yeah.
That's
Because,
actually who he is.
yes, I love that.
I do too. Um,
I'm reminded, I don't know why, about a dual nature. Some people believe that we have a dual nature, like that it's, I think in cartoons, you have a angel on one
the
shoulder and
angel
a
and the
devil on
demon.
the yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, it's not true. You've been made a new creature. You have new DNA. What is still there, and we've talked about this before, is carnality and your flesh.
Yes.
So there is a battle, if you will, between the, because we're made up of spirit, soul, body. There is a battle of that spirit going against old souls. I mean, things that have happened, etc.
Yep.
But you don't have a dual nature. That's,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, it's funny that that specifically reminded me. I was just last week reading this verse, um, Psalm 119, verse 25. My soul clings to the dust. Revive me according to your word. And I think
Mm,
that what we
yeah.
would describe as the dual nature is the fact that the carnal, fleshly, unrevived soul portion of you, which is true. Again, you are a spirit that has a soul that's living in a body. So you still have that soul. And that's the bittersweetness, if you will, during different parts of your journey, is to recognize that God gave you this land. He told you you could take it. So this soul that you're in that feels inconquerable, that has maybe fallen off the wagon of addiction 5,000 times, you and he agreed to go take this land together, that you have this soul, and to recognize and accept that your soul is clinging to dust today. It is desiring the temporal. It is desiring that which will perish. It's desiring dishonor and weakness and sin and separation. It wants those things. And to know that on the one hand, the Lord will never allow you to be tempted beyond your ability. And whenever you are tempted, he gives you the means to escape. That verse, I think, is maybe 1 Corinthians 10. At the beginning of that verse, Paul consoles them by saying, listen, you are not being tempted and falling in any way that any man ever has not been tempted. It's
Mhm.
okay. Your soul is clinging to dust today. The whole point is that you, A, don't disqualify yourself because you're clinging to dust in this moment, in that thought, with this constant thorn in your flesh. It's okay. The first part is accept that and know that's what's going on. And then the second piece is this is your closed mem. This is where you go in intimacy. Peter's verse right there, boldly before the throne in your time of need on the day of judgment, because in that intimacy, this is the current battle you're fighting, and he will walk with you. He's the comforter. He's not a being outside of you that you're waiting for him to grant and release some blessing to you and some new thing. You're going to him as a life-giving spirit saying, oh, wow, I'm not experiencing being a life-giving spirit today. Help me in my unbelief. Let me stand in that truth. Revive me according to your word. Or what Mary said, be unto me according to your word. Let me not
I was
go
just
ahead.
thinking of the death, burial, resurrection, stand in
Yes.
the, go through that process again with
Yes.
Jesus,
Yes.
that put to death that old, step in the resurrection.
Exactly. And so it's simple, not easy. The way is not hard. It is very different. And so an understanding of starting from the beginning when you walk this way, that you are a life-giving spirit, that is paramount to standing in its fullness. Because if you think that you're outside and you're endlessly going to have to try to become it, you are right. You will never achieve that. So just start with accepting the gift. And I think that's why, as we've talked about, it's often easier when you've reached rock bottom of your own accord to accept a gift than it is to think you're doing pretty decent. You just need to fix up one or two more things, you
Yeah.
know? Um, well, we're getting relatively close to time. We did receive some feedback that it wouldn't be a terrible idea to sort of recap at the end of episodes some of what we covered. So what's bubbling up for you that you think we should walk away with from today?
Well, I think the life-giving spirit, that
Mm,
is a gift and it's been given to us. And we
mm,
do, it is a different walk and a different way than a lot of us um, have learned from the beginning.
mhm,
So, but starting, like you said, from the truth that that spirit is alive in us,
mhm.
let it do its work
Exactly.
in you.
That he wants to.
Yeah, it wants to do its work. Just let it.
Hmm. I
And
love that.
I'm also thinking of Deuteronomy at the uh I think it's 30, when God said, hey, listen, I put two choices in front of you, life or death, blessing or curses. Choose life,
Hmm.
choose blessings.
Exactly.
And it like is that easy, but
Totally. Well,
yeah.
and again, not to minimize it, so to speak, but I think that what I would hope you would take away from the conversation is do not reject the goodness of God based on your own limited capacity for goodness. I think
Mm,
so often we don't believe that the work has already been done because it's easier to believe that he's not that good. He wouldn't be that good to me. I don't deserve this. Those
mm,
are easier places to stand when you feel trapped in the prison. It's easier to sit in the darkness than it is to find that little sliver of light in the corner of the room that you might have to like crawl into. And
mm,
so to recognize that part of the endless snowball effect of being a life-giving spirit is learning to extend to yourself the same forgiveness and the same liberation from condemnation that you intellectually accept that Jesus has done. Really accept it for yourself. Really let your mind be blown far more than you could ask, think, or imagine at how good God actually is by not preemptively starting from the backside. Just see what happens in a week, 2 weeks, 6 months, 10 years of believing what he has said, that you have been made as he is, so are you now in this earth. Start with that as true. Let your mind be transformed. Deal with the resistance to that which comes up in you. The obstacle is the way. As you start to try and believe this, you are tempted to believe your resistance instead of it. And that is the dying portion. That's the going through the process of death, burial, resurrection, doing Paul's exercise of putting on the new man, is in the moment where the resistance feels strongest that this couldn't be true, is the true endurance that Paul and James and Peter and John are all talking about. That enduring till the end from that place is how you receive the crown of glory, by believing in the moment where you least believe it, that he would still do that for you.
Good word.
All right, friends. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.